There's something that happens. There's a connection with the divine. There is a state of flow that occurs where I lose all sense of time and almost a euphoric state. But I'd say writing is the process between, stripping your soul bare.
Hello, welcome to the Flute 360 podcast, where we incorporate a panoramic view of flute-related topics. I am your host, Heidi K. Begay, and this is episode 37, an interview with Valerie Coleman. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Hi, Valerie.
Hey, Heidi. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for calling.
Oh, thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to say a huge congratulations on your new appointment at Frost School of Music.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been a real treat. Right now, I am commuting from New York City down to Miami, and then in January 2019, I will be there full time. So
Wow.
I'm trying to keep my New York apartment, which is rent stabilized. So I'm going to be looking for sublet soon.
Oh, wow. So anyone in New York who wants to sublet Valerie Coleman's apartment, here's an announcement.
No crazy people, please.
No crazy people. Only sane and preferably musicians, possibly. Oh, shoot. So if you want to, we can go ahead and dive into the questions.
Okay, sounds good.
Great.
Let's go.
So please share with us your background and tell us a little bit who you are for those who may not know you.
Okay, I am a flutist and composer. Most people know me by the fact that I was a flutist for 2 decades, the creator of Imani Winds. And this year, I have retired from the group and I've started a full-time professorship at the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami. I am also a composer, so I have a dual nature of bringing home the bacon, so to speak, or of making a living. And my compositions, they range from writing for flute to orchestral works and band works. Coming up, I have 2 flute works that I'm writing that are on the docket. One is for flutist Trudy Kane, who is the retiring professor of flute at the Frost School of Music, and also a composition for the New Music Flute Consortium. So they have, I think it's over 24 flutists that are on board with it, and it will be premiered by Carol Wincenc next January. So there's a lot of good stuff coming along, a commission with the Philadelphia Orchestra as well. And in February, the Atlanta Symphony will be premiering my piece, Phenomenal Women, or at least giving the Atlanta premiere. It was just premiered a couple of weeks ago at Carnegie Hall. So things are chugging along, and I'm just trying to keep up and try to keep that energy moving in that forward direction.
Yeah. Like I said earlier before the recording, you are a super busy woman. You are just taking it all on, and it's so inspiring to watch. I saw your beautiful performance in Orlando.
Oh.
Yeah, I really appreciated your energy and just the human interaction and your new piece, because that was written for the high school section of the NFA.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you know what? I'm just coming to a time in my life where ownership over my own artistry is really key to me, and it's very important. And between you and me and all the listeners out there, I felt it was necessary to retire from my wind quintet in order to start to change my perspective and start to change how I look at being a professional musician. So yeah, I needed that kind of freedom to all of a sudden say, okay, now it's time to write and create your own music. It's time to connect and be able to be that source of connection for the listener as well. So my priorities just utterly and completely switched in a different direction. And then a landfall of wonderful opportunities came my way.
Beautiful. Isn't that validating, though, to say, hey, world, I want to take this avenue with my career or take this avenue, like you said, with your artistry. And then all these opportunities are coming to you and validating that it was a correct decision?
It is. It really is. And, we've always heard whenever we're graduating, the speaker of that guest speaker will always say, take risks.
Yes.
We've heard that speech before, but it is so true because when you take risks, it automatically starts to put forces in motion to go towards the direction of your dreams. And I think taking risk is another way of saying, make a commitment to work on what you've always intended to work on. So I found that twice, once with Imani Winds in founding the group. They did not know me when I first gave everybody a call. I was a telemarketer for the day.
Wow.
And I called them up cold turkey and told them the idea. And one by one, each person decided, okay, well, this might be interesting. We're going to sit down and read through some music. I'll be willing to do that. And so over the years, that started to build. And the energy was all there. And if you can imagine 5 people with that kind of energy moving forward, you can move mountains. And then the second time is the second part of my life, so to speak, or I guess second career, departing from Imani Winds to really pursue this career that I've admired Marcel Moyse, Katherine Hoover, all the great composers and partners who have blended artistry with composition.
Yeah. So I think it's really important what you just said about being uncomfortable and taking risks is so important for those younger musicians because you have had and you do have such a successful career with Grammy nominations and writing these standard works in our repertoire. You could have easily sat back and said, oh, I'm established now and I'm going to be comfy in my spot right here. But you didn't. And you said, hey, what else am I made of? What else can I do? How can I push the barrier and push myself? And I think that's a fine example for all musicians, but especially the younger generation.
Well, I have to admit to you that I have a bad case of imposter syndrome.
Don't we all?
So for me, I'm never comfortable. I always feel like I have to keep moving forward. What is the next thing? And what is the next level of artistry? What is the next level on my instrument? Because the saying, proper practice prevents piss poor performance.
I love it.
I say that 10 times really fast.
Right.
And that is something that's so true. When you are prepared, you just feel better about your artistry. You're able to claim it. The roadblocks that we put up in our mind that keep us from really connecting with the music. Part of that is proper preparation. So every single day, I'm just trying to get to that next level of making sure that I'm able to convey as an artist the music clearly, because it is a responsibility of all of us as flutists, as musicians, to share our talent, be storytellers, and connect with the audience so that when they leave your concert or whatever performance you have, they feel that much better about the world around them or about themselves, whatever it may be. They just feel uplifted.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That was beautifully said.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. So let's kind of backtrack a little then. How did you get into composing?
Well, I've always been composing. There wasn't a time, it's kind of like when you meet a really good friend and you can't remember exactly that moment that you've met.
Okay.
But I do remember being a young kid and playing with an organ that was in my mom's house. It was this little cheap organ that was part Hammond organ and part Casio keyboard. And, that, I guess in a way, there was never a moment where creativity was something that I decided to do all of a sudden. It has always been a part of my childhood because it was always a part of my playtime.
Okay.
So that keyboard, I would just play on it and just get really accustomed to creating melodies. I don't even know how the process began. But what I do know is that around 9 or 10 or so, I started to think about documentation, how to get this music recorded. So back in the day, in the 70s, they had old keyboards. They had the old cassette tape recorders.
Sure.
And so I would play the melody in one cassette tape, play that back. And while that was looping, put on another layer. And so I would work it between two cassette recordings. And if you can imagine each recorder, warping the sound with each and every single playback. So the end result was something that, looking back, was truly horrendous and macabre. Something right out of a horror movie, just warped sound, out of tune and everything. But, for a 9-year-old, it was the greatest thing in the world.
Wow.
That then became the means of, and I was doing that with the flute as well. So between the keyboard and the flute, going back and forth. And I think it got to a point where I just decided, okay, this needs to be written down. So I had to create my own notation because at the time I hadn't learned to play flute just yet.
Okay.
And, I did not know how to read music. So, just boxes and triangles and circles to mimic pitch and rhythm, things like that. So I couldn't wait. I could not wait to pick up notation and learn that throughout elementary school and middle school, so on. And when that happened, that just opened up a whole different world. I was eager to learn scales as a flutist because it informed my writing process. It informed how I created and melodies, things like that. Yeah. So,
neat.
Yeah, learning flutes and being creative and writing has always been hand in hand for me.
Okay. No, that's a really great background. Did I see a video of you talking about like your mother running a daycare and how like you were that part of play and getting messy and being creative was always, like you were saying earlier, just in your nature and a part of your life?
Listen, I had a great childhood.
Yeah. Good.
I had the best childhood. And the reason why is because my mom had that daycare.
Okay.
And the daycare, it's still there. She's still in business. It's been about 53 years now. It's been a while.
Wow.
And she is this elderly lady who loves children and loves to make sure that they have everything they need in order for their minds to develop.
Okay.
And so to me, she is the quintessential educator. And on top of that, in my backyard, there was a whole playground.
Oh, wow.
But what was great about my mom is that she wanted kids to have a safe space. She wants kids to have a safe space to explore, to be scientists, to be musicians, to be artists, to learn how to communicate. There's always something to do at that daycare. And so that's how I grew up. And I think that really allowed for creativity to take a front row seat in my development because, she never judged. My mom is this awesome lady she's so quiet, but yet so powerful and patient. She loves to let a child's mind unfold and grow in its own time. So that, I really appreciate her quite a bit. I only get a chance to see her about twice a year because my schedule is what it is. But yeah, there's always that ache to go home and see mom.
Yeah. Well, just the way you portrayed her so beautifully, it feels like she's just such a warm and loving person. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, thanks. My pleasure.
Yeah. Since this is a series about composers, I kind of want to dive into your writing process. And I understand that each composition is its own unique entity. And I'm sure you approach each piece completely different than the next. But do you have a general writing process when you compose a new work?
Yes, there is a general process. And, I always try to shy away from it. But at the end of the day, I always come back to it. It's never an easy process to really create a piece from start to finish. It might be easy for some, but it's not for me because it requires digging deep.
Mm.
And that's a hard thing to do. I have to admit, I listened to your podcast with Gary Schocker, and he mentioned that some of his best work happens when he is in a solitary situation, when he is by himself and there is silence around him. He's able to really free up and create.
Mm.
And I find that is a very similar type to my process.
Okay.
And my process is a very intuitive one. And the best way to describe it is what Arturo O'Farrell said. He said, when you're going downhill skiing completely naked and you're passing bushes and trees and things that are literally abrasive against your skin.
Uh-huh.
And when you get down at the bottom of the hill, you are, your skin is lacerated, but you have in your hand a piece.
Wow.
You have a piece of music.
Wow.
And I realized that kind of investment into a piece of music really does lend depth and purpose and connection. So, I think something happens when you finally have that piece and musicians pick it up and they play it and it connects to them in some way that is personal to them. It makes the process all worth it. And I'm not going to say it's a painful process at all. It's a really glorious process. Once you get that kernel of an idea, or once you get that topic that you really gravitate towards because you know that it will make an impact or set a message that is not only true to you, but makes the world around you better for it. And once that happens, I always feel that there's something that happens. There's a connection with the divine. There is a state of flow that occurs where I lose all sense of time and almost a euphoric state.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say writing is the process between, stripping your soul bare and also having that euphoric state of timelessness too. And so, an intellectual property has weight to it. It's never a light thing.
Oh my gosh, how insightful. I mean, and you can, because you're a flutist too, it's one flutist speaking to another. It's the same, what it seems like to me, just diving into practicing. Hours could go by. Hours could go by. And I'm just like, where did the day go? And I love it. It's pain because I'm pushing myself to the next level, but it's bliss too at the same time. And so that's what I'm able to connect to what you just said.
It's so true. And it's very true for any discipline, whether you are an Olympic athlete or a painter. It's so true that those moments just really kind of take you away in a timeless manner. And I feel that same way as a flutist as well. Those times where you're just like, I was only meaning to practice for an hour today and 2 hours just went by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have to set a timer sometimes just to force myself to physically take a break. So you're not, doing anything weird with your body.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Absolutely. Yeah. You have to be very cognizant of what's going on with your wrist, the weight of the instrument, your shoulders, everything. Yeah. I completely relate to both of those things. And, funny enough, when I'm playing the flute or when I'm in the mode of playing the flute, it's hard for me to write music. And then vice versa. So most of my life, I've been trying to marry the two together. And as I'm getting older, it's becoming easier and easier now that I'm starting to really pick up the flute and use that as a means of creating melodies and things. And I think that has a lot to do with the practice of improvising.
Okay.
And, it's something that 21st century music is starting to embrace more and more. But I find that when you improvise, you increase your musical language.
Okay.
You increase your own particular style. You increase your own particular voice. And then it's a matter of documenting that. So I've been finding that time flies when I'm just sitting and improvising as well. So yeah, it all comes down under the umbrella of creativity and just allowing, just like in technology, allowing each system to talk to one another.
Okay. Yeah, that it definitely hits home for me. My husband is a blues guitarist, And yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And so, I mean, before him though, like my first instrument was piano. And so everything, my mom was an organist and everything was read what's on the stand, read it perfectly, read it right, and then my like musical world totally changed meeting him. I mean, he had a different background. He was not taught from a formal teacher, et cetera. He taught himself how to play guitar and he did everything by ear. So when we met and we were friends, he, listened to me practice and he's like, do you just ever get messy and play and just improvise? I'm like, no.
Get messy. Yes. Get messy. I love that.
Why, yeah. And so I'm like, no, because at that time in my life, that would have made me so uncomfortable. And, from that moment on, we've been married for 10 years. He's just always, always supporting me, encouraging me to, just to improvise because that's his world, and what you said perfectly, he says the same thing in a different way. He's like, you'll be on your own 2 feet. You'll find your own voice. And I think that's what you're saying too. So the classically trained flutist in me, like, still irks and I get a little uncomfortable when I improvise, but it's good because that means I'm growing. So yeah, just hearing how it sounds like you have such a strong belief in this, improvising world. It just kind of confirms for me things that I've heard not just from Eric, but from other jazz and blues and, other artists that require it within their niche.
It actually affirms everything that we learn on a classical scale. We just have to find that doorway into improvisation that connects us with it. For me, improvisation has really changed the way I've looked at Mozart. And, we all as flutists, we study that Mozart, both of them, the 2 concerti, we go through the whole vernacular of repertoire that was created for the flute by Mozart. But we are learning it because we know it's a necessary part of our repertoire. So only the few masters out there really start to transcend when they start to look through the lens of Mozart and his style as an improviser. And, I find that cadenzas, the cadenza that I wrote when I was 23 years old is way different than the cadenza that I would write now because improvisation influences it. I can go to different places with it. I can go to different tonalities in a way that Mozart did. So that to me is that doorway, is that connection to not only his style, but the freedom that he must have had in writing all this beautiful music as a pianist, as a keyboardist.
Yeah, and just think about, the musicians of that day. I mean, it would have been second nature for them just to whip out a cadenza here or there on stage for, that performance or this performance. They wouldn't have given it a second thought.
Exactly right. And that's so exciting to know that there's a return to that now. I think in a lot of ways over the past few decades that music has been starving a little bit with missing that particular component classical music has. And the return is coming back in such a full rush, but not necessarily within a classical vein, but more as a blending between different genres that allows the performer permission to find their voice through that fusion.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point to make. So speaking of compositions, hopefully this is a good segue into this next question. I know each piece, again, it's, like you were saying, going down that ski slope, butt naked, and feeling all the branches hit you.
Right.
Because of that process, I'm sure each piece is like your own baby. But which composition do you favor more, or which composition do you wish could be performed more on stage?
Well, I have to admit that I have amnesia.
Okay.
Once the piece is written, maybe there is a couple of weeks where I feel utterly and completely connected still to the creation process. But once it's done, the piece is its own being. And I fall in love with the personality that I could not have predicted when I was writing it, but I fall in love with the different personalities of each and every single piece. And everything has its season. Right now, I am very much in love with in terms of the flute compositions, Famille Humaine, which is the latest piece that I wrote for the NFA high school competition.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I am so in love with that piece right now is because of its message. It goes back to Maya Angelou's poem, Human Family, that says, "We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike." And so in today's climate, I just feel that message just needs to be heard. And somehow or another, through that downhill skiing that I did, I'd like to think that the melodies, the composition of the piece, the inner workings of the piece really go directly towards the words of the poem. They were completely informed by that. So right now, that piece makes me feel like there is hope for humanity. And the response that I've gotten from folks who have listened to the work, who have performed the work, is very much the same. So, yeah, I think that right now, this is for me season. And the next piece that I'm writing for Trudy Kane is based on the works by Henri Matisse, his paintings and cutouts. So diving into his world will no doubt give me a product, a piece of music that I will be in love with within its own season as well. So, yeah, I hate to be that mom that says, "Oh, I love all my babies the same way."
But it's true.
It's true. It is. It is true. I mean, there are certain pieces where I'm like, "Oh, dear God, why? How in the world did I write that, and why?"
Oh, no.
But as I get older and the flute becomes more comfortable and writing becomes more comfortable and I become more comfortable in my own skin, the quality of musicianship increases. And I'm starting to see a consistency with the things that I produce. So it's a real treat, and I'm grateful for that. So now I can fully say I love my pieces all the same.
Oh, great. Yeah, I didn't really think you could choose one. I was just kind of curious to see if one would happen just to, be on the tip of your tongue. But yeah, no, that's wonderful. So for the budding new composer, what suggestions or tips would you give to him or her?
Well, I really want to focus in on flutists who are thinking about writing, who are creative. I was listening to yet another one of your podcasts where you had a student who was very creative. I think it was the Gary Schocker podcast.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, where you mentioned that you had a student that was very creative and you were able to encourage her to compose. And the tip that I would directly say to those flutists out there is that you are already creative. Just think about, really tap in and believe in that creativity that is inside of you and use that as your foundation to fearlessly, unabashedly dive into writing music. And don't feel like you have to write a masterpiece from the first note. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself. It might be a simple melody. It might even be two notes that you feel just sound good and sit well on the instrument. And from there, you can just keep building. And most of all, don't feel like you have to give yourself a time frame to complete whatever you set out to do. In other words, the beauty about writing, what scares people about writing is the fact that you're creating from nothing and you don't have a point of departure. But that's also the beauty of it as well, because it allows you to search out what resonates most with you. And that's work, that's mental work, that's spiritual work that we have to do anyway when we are playing the Dutilleux or playing, any other flute repertoire piece that we have. We have to find the creativity in it. We have to find our own unique interpretation. We get so caught up in those notes that we lose sight of, what did you call it, typewriter?
Yeah, typewriting playing. It's just very vertical to me. And it just feels like there's like no connection.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. So it really does tie into composing. And I always feel that tasking a student with creating a melody or something, often for the moment, disperses the typewriter playing mindset.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that that's a wonderful tool to use within private lessons. But yeah, just really feel like you're going to take that risk. Take the risk, feel like you're going to mess up, and be okay with it.
Yeah, exactly. And on this topic of being creative, and I loved what you said, you have creativity in you. Like it's very deep in you and it's just a part of who you are. My listeners have heard me mention this book before, but I thought to share with you because I think this quote, if I can verbatim off the top of my head, recite it, something that I think you would appreciate. And it's from Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic book. She says something along the lines of, you as a person are a product of creation. So you therefore are a creator. You can be creative because you are a product of creation. And I think that is so beautifully said. So that's how I'm able to tie into what you just said so eloquently.
Well, that goes back to Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, where he says, your children are not just your children, they are the product of life's longing for itself. It comes through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, they do not belong to you. So I look at creativity in that same lens. We have a responsibility towards it, but at the end, it does not fully belong to you. You can claim it, you can make it your own, but the impact that it makes, the impact that a composition makes, the impact that an interpretation makes is no longer yours because it has to get out there and affect the people around you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's its own entity.
My pick for you would be Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, because you are literally saying what she says in that book. It's so cool. I love when life makes those connections, because she literally says along the same line, she says, there are these ideas floating around all of our heads. And say idea of writing a book. I don't know. We'll just pick Jane Eyre. So this idea of, Jane Eyre and the characters in her story are there, and they're finding a creator to literally make this idea, the plot, the characters come to life. And if for some reason, was that written by Bronson? I think it was. But if she did not want to take on that story, it would have gone over to the next person. And it's going to find somebody to create and to bring to life these characters. So you're just that vessel. So once that idea comes, then you're like, okay, and then you can work with it, go down that ski slope with it. But if for some reason you start at the top of the hill with it, and you're like, not my thing right now, then it will move on to the next creator. And so, yeah, oh my goodness. If you ever get the chance, I know your time is so packed with Miami and New York, but if you ever get a moment and you need a book pick, I think Big Magic.
Oh, please email me that, okay?
I will.
Name, everything, because I do need a good book. You get on the plane, that's a perfect time to read.
Exactly. Yes, all the commuting.
Yes.
Yep. Are there any last comments or suggestions that you have for the listeners, whether it's for flutists or educators, researchers, composers? It could be anything that's on your heart.
Actually, I'd like to do a shameless plug,
Please.
if that is okay.
Yes.
Well, I am talking with Nicole Chamberlain and also Amanda Harberg, and we are planning a flute intensive that is based on creativity and composing and just really for all levels, whether it's a flutist that has never written a piece of music before and would be interested in doing so, to a flutist who has written some music and they just want to get some input, or they just want other people to hear what they've done. This intensive will cover that. Wow. And so that's happening in the summer of 2020. Perfect. So I just want everybody to keep an eye out for that. And most of all, this is dedicated to Katherine Hoover.
Oh, yes.
She was a dear friend and a source of inspiration to me. So with her passing, I look out at all the flutist composers that are out there and how we are responsible for continuing her legacy. Oh. So, this institute, this intensive is a good way of just letting her spirit live on.
Oh, beautiful. Well, here's another great example of how life connects, and it was so meant to be. I was going to mention this at the end of the series 6, talking with composers, because I usually do like a wrap up of a series and then I move on to my next idea. But now is a better time than any. I literally started this composer series because of the passing of Katherine Hoover.
Oh, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, she was a dear friend of mine as well. And when I heard of her passing, it hit me hard like it did all of us. And I thought, wow, like, because my thesis for my master's was on Kokopelli and Winter Spirits by Katherine. And so I had the joy and the pleasure of picking her brain and talking with her from about 2008 to 2009. And in my show links, my shameless plug will be putting a link for people to find my thesis if they like, only because I would like for people to see in the appendices our conversations via email. And you can just sense her warmness and her friendship and, and it was just total, I don't think anything's by luck, but I happened to, in Orlando for this past NFA convention, present my master's thesis, which was like, oh my gosh, what was that? 9 years ago, 10 years ago, I proposed it to the NFA convention, and they had a whole Native American series. I believe that was a Thursday performance. And Mary Karen Clardy was there, Terry Sanchez was there, and they were performing Native American pieces. And so I got to do a lecture recital on those 2 pieces and present my thesis. And then a couple months later, she had passed away. And I bring this up because I was saddened because she was planning on being there, and I was anticipating to see her because I wanted to ask her pieces about her mountain mesa, and I wanted to ask her stuff about other compositions that I was diving into. And since she wasn't there, I thought, oh, well, I'll pick her brain later. And then I heard that she passed away, and I thought, oh, my heart just dropped. I'm like, well, I thought, well, what can I give back to the flute community in some way? And I thought, you know what? Let me pick all of these living composers' brains and celebrate life and celebrate music and what we do as artists and, live it up now because life is so short.
Yeah. And, you're really tying it into the fact that we as flutists, as a community, we are one of the most open communities when it comes to accepting new music. And in the creative process. I'm so proud to be a part of the flute community because of that. And of course, there are, the saxophone community, percussionists, they have their own thing as well. There's something about the flute community's camaraderie and embracing new works that, to me, just profound sense of pride. So I'm so glad that you're doing this program, this series. It needs to be done.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. First of all, I think that's amazing that you're Nicole Chamberlain and this composer platform that you're giving to young flutists and composers coming out in summer 2020. It's perfect timing to announce that so people can start prepping. Are there going to be any announcements like via Twitter or Instagram or the NFA website?
When it's out and we have everything planned, I think we're going to have the University of South Carolina in the first year. And then every year will be in a different place. So it's a floating intensive. And when we get all of that together, there's going to be a huge announcement and no one will be able to miss it.
Great. Perfect. No, that's good. I just want people to be able to, sign up or inquire, if they are so interested. But that sounds like a great idea, and that's truly exciting.
Thank you. Well, I know it's going to take off. Whenever you start something, you always have to have faith in it, and you always have to invest the energy of projection into it. So I know it's going to take off.
Perfect. Love it.
Well, thank you so much, Heidi, for having me on your blog. It's a real treat, and your blog is just really fabulous. It's informative, and once I started listening to one episode, I found myself like Netflix. I just kept going. So,
oh, thank you. That means so much to me.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. And thank you for your time. I know how valuable it is. And we appreciate you and your insights and your talents so much. And I love talking with you. Your energy is great. And I hope to meet you in person someday.
Oh, we will. We will most definitely meet one of these conferences. Sure.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Valerie. Have a good day. Today's episode is sponsored by J&K Productions. They produce all of my episodes, from adding the intro and outro music to editing the audio and all post-production needs. Contact them for your next podcast project at jkproductions.media. Thank you for listening to the Flute 360 podcast. For more information, please visit HeidiKBegay.com. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate and review in the iTunes store. Let's talk about flute.